Well, you may not like it, but you better learn how, cause it's your turn now. Now you suck.
So basically what that is a very, very disturbing movie, bro.
What's it called?
Irreversible. It is playing in a reverse manner. So the beginning is actually the end, and then the end is actually the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So it's like that, and one of the main characters, he's running around looking for somebody specific, right? Somebody did something to his ex-girlfriend.
What happened?
She sees a guy and a woman. They're arguing, basically being abusive with her, and she kind of asks, "Oh, are you okay?" The guy turns around and he's kind of like, "Yo, like, mind your own business." The other girl runs away, so it just leaves him and her in this tunnel where nobody is around. Pulls out a knife,
Stabs her? Like kills her?
no, he essays her, yeah. And the scene is 9 minutes long of just that.
And it shows it?
Everything, no cuts, bro. I couldn't even watch it, bro. I watched like the lead up, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not watching this shit.
Everyone in this neighborhood and a lot of people in this town know that evil lurks here. Evil lurks in this home. Yes, I'd like to say a prayer before we start to protect us. Dear Lord, please remove all evil spirits. Do not let them into our body. I don't know why so much evil happens here, but you can feel it.
Like, you feel the energy in here, like, as soon as you walk up in this place. This used to be a trap house.
There was devil worshiping going on. They were doing devil worshiping in order to not get caught by the police. He helped a lot of people that crossed over from the border. He was a clearer.
The house behind me could possibly be the most haunted place in all of Texas.
Someone got hurt really bad here, and supposedly there's blood all over this room.
What kind of drugs were they doing and selling?
Crystal meth.
My mama called me one day and she says someone died in the back house. In the last 2 years there were 45 calls here, shooting, overdoses. Ever since I can remember, bad things happen here, and I want to know why. Supposedly there's a giant snake that lives underneath the house. My mom used to collect crosses. I think she was trying to keep the demons away, but none of her praying worked.
Have you ever had anybody come in here to investigate?
Never.
Never. So we're like the first?
Yes. She said that there's money hidden here.
I found something! What the White eyes?
That is like something out of a nightmare, dude.
Oh my god.
No way.
It looks like blood splatter.
It's true then.
Circumstances surrounding the mysterious disappearance and death of Courtney Lynn Townsend are bizarre, and I need everyone to go down this rabbit hole with me. 33-year-old Courtney Townsend was last seen on November 16th of last year in Hurricane, Utah. So that day, she had taken her parents' car from their home in St. George without their permission and began driving. About a half hour before her parents reported the car stolen, Courtney was pulled over in Hurricane for speeding, and the body cam footage from the police officer showed her acting really nervous. He asked her where she was going, in which she replied Cedar City, and then he gave her a citation. But before he could leave, Courtney tried handing him a small jewelry box with an envelope folded up in the middle, but the officer said that he couldn't take it and drove off, letting her go. Now after this, Courtney vanished, but 3 days later, the car she was driving was found at a campsite in a wooded area on Cedar Mountain. It was stuck on some rocks and completely burnt to a crisp, and this was kind of in the area of Duck Creek, about 10 feet off the road. Found around the car were a bunch of items, including Navy dog tags, a wallet, and a handful of credit cards and IDs, none of which belonged to Courtney. At this point, Courtney hadn't been reported missing yet, and the car was in Kane County, a completely different jurisdiction. So the Kane County Sheriff's Office didn't know the circumstances surrounding the situation, but instead of looking further into a burned vehicle, police treated the car as arson and had it towed away, where it was quickly taken to an impound lot and destroyed. This is important to note because all potential evidence that could have been left behind in the car was now destroyed. So after a couple of weeks of no contact from Courtney, which was odd because she talked to her parents almost every day, they officially reported her missing to the St. George police on December 2nd. This is when Courtney's disappearance was connected to the burned vehicle found a few weeks prior, but at this point, police said that they couldn't do a ground search of the area until all of the snow had melted, which would likely be midsummer. While they waited, the family searched for Courtney themselves, and they even hired a private investigator, but it was like Courtney vanished into thin air, and nothing was found. When police did their first initial search, it was early May, and they reportedly searched near where her car was found, searching for over 400 hours and walking over 200 miles. But they found nothing, which is odd because just a couple of weeks later, on May 27th, a person who was out riding their ATV on Cedar Mountain in the Duck Creek Ridge bridge area stumbled across some clothing on the side of the road. This person was supposedly familiar with Courtney's disappearance, so they called police who brought in tracking dogs, and they came across partial human remains near a water tank. When I say partial, I mean only pieces of her were found. But after comparing them to dental records, it was confirmed that they did belong to Courtney. What's sad is the fact that this was extremely close to where her burned car was found 6 months prior. So Courtney was found, but so many questions remain in this case. Like how she ended up where she did, where the rest of her remains are, and how exactly she died. Okay, go to part 2.
A woman once shared a chilling story with a journalist during an interview for a true crime piece. A story so disturbing it stayed with the journalist long after the conversation ended. When the woman was around 8 years old, she started waking up in the middle of the night paralyzed by fear. She would run into her father's room insisting that there was a man in her closet watching her. Night after night, she woke up shaking, her small voice trembling as she begged her father to check the closet. But each time, her father brushed it off. "There's no such thing as the boogeyman," he would tell her. "You're just having bad dreams." He would then tuck her into bed, kiss her forehead, and assure her that everything was fine. But it wasn't. This went on for about a week, the girl's fear growing more intense each night. Her father started to get annoyed. "It's just your imagination," he insisted. But one night after yet another claim, he finally had enough. He marched her back to her room and said, "I'll show you there's nothing in your closet." He walked over to the closet and reached for the handle. It opened an inch, then suddenly slammed shut from the inside. For a moment, there was silence. Then the father's face drained of color. Without hesitation, he yanked the door open. And there, crouched among his daughter's clothes, was a man. His eyes were wide and glassy, his breath shallow. He had been hiding there, watching, night after night. The father didn't think. He lunged at the intruder, dragging him out of the closet and slamming him to the floor. The man fought back, but the father was fueled by rage and terror. He beat the man until blood smeared the carpet beneath them. Moments later, the police arrived and pulled the man away. It turned out the intruder had been sneaking into the house every night through a loose basement window. He would hide in the closet, watching the little girl sleep for hours. No one knew how long he had been doing it before he was caught.
This was one of those cases I thought I would go to my deathbed never knowing the truth. Investigators have reason to believe Aisha Degree was a victim of homicide. I just can't believe how many new updates there are in this case. For those of you that don't know, a 9-year-old girl called Aisha Degree seemingly left her home in the middle of the night of her own accord in a thunderstorm, and she's just never been seen again. Now, this was 25 years ago. She just vanished in the middle of the night, and to be honest, I doubted we'd ever get answers. I'll summarise everything new that we now know, but there is a huge deep dive on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation. In September 2024, the FBI got new search warrants to look into a family called the Deadman family. Now, these were 2 parents and 3 daughters. So how are the family linked to Aisha? Aisha was seen by drivers walking along North Carolina Highway 18, and witnesses saw her being pulled into a car that looked a little bit like this one. Turns out the Deadman family have a very similar vehicle. Also, some of Aisha's belongings were actually recovered, double bagged and disposed of, and DNA analysis of these items linked 2 people to them. One was a man called Russell Underhill, who was basically an acquaintance of the Deadman family, and also a Deadman family member. Also, I believe one of the Deadman sisters' hairs was found on Aisha's top. There's also a bunch of really suspicious sounding text messages that the police uncovered. Now, I'm not saying anybody is 100% guilty, but just from the search warrant documents, I'm shocked by what the family have said. Quotes such as, "I'm scared though, Dad is probably going to be a huge suspect. This is going to get nothing but worse. I'm just so worried, so worried. I mean, it's a nightmare that's going to keep getting worse. I can see nothing good happening anytime soon, and I'm an optimist." Again, huge deep dive on my podcast with loads of the text messages. A witness also stated in the 2000s he witnessed the Deadman daughters at a party. He said they were discussing the case and one allegedly said, "I killed Aisha Degree," and the other one told her to shut the F up. The witness passed a polygraph. I believe one of the Deadman daughters also took a polygraph after avoiding it for ages, but was found to be deceptive. She also, during the questioning, made a pretty shocking statement that was, "If my dad did it, he did it, but I had nothing to do with it."
If you have horses or if you have any sort of cattle or whatever, but mainly horses,
Okay.
if you've noticed that they have braids on them,
Oh, yeah? Yeah?
most of the times when their horses have braids and they didn't do it themselves, a duende braided their hair. That's like a sign that there's duendes in that area.
What the fuck? I've never heard about that.
Some people are saying it's witches, but I'm going to show you a video of this guy. He's basically talking about his experiences with duendes, and one of them is a statue, because you know some people believe duendes are like little goblins running around, but other ones are like statues and shit. In Mexico, there's even little markets where you could buy some, and basically you give offerings, and you have like some sort of like pact with them. You give them whatever they want, and then they help you out whenever you need, right? But you let me know what the statue does.
Wait, what?
Les piden cosas para su vida. Por ejemplo, a este brother le piden ayúdame a dejar el vicio. Entonces, quiero dejar de fumar, por favor ayúdame. Entonces vienen, dejan cigarro. Quiero dejar de tomar, por favor ayúdame. Le deja hacer de tomar, por favor ayúdame. Le deja hacer...
There's no way that's real, bro.
So it blinked.
No, it winked. It didn't blink. It was only one eye.
And yo, these legends have been around for a minute. It goes from Ireland to the Philippines to Mexico to even other parts in Central America and even South America. There's no way people could be telling the same lie.
It was late at night when a man walked to his car parked just outside a dimly lit movie theater. As he reached for the door handle, he noticed two young boys approaching from the shadows. They knocked on his window, their expressions eerily calm. Hesitantly, the man rolled down his window, but the moment he did, an unshakable sense of dread washed over him. Something was off. "Hey mister, we have a problem," the older boy said smoothly, his voice unsettlingly composed. "My friend and I want to see the films, but we forgot our money. We need to go home and get it. Can you give us a ride?" The man hesitated. Something about them made his skin crawl. Their faces were pale, their movements too precise, too deliberate. "Come on, mister," the boy continued, his voice almost hypnotic. "Let us in. We can't get in unless you say we can." His tone remained polite, but there was an underlining pressure in his words. "Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it." It was then that the man truly saw their eyes. They were black as coal. No whites, no pupils, just endless, soulless darkness staring back at him. The man's pulse quickened, and the boy seemed to sense his fear. "Come on, mister," he coaxed again. "We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun." The man's hands trembled as he gripped the gear shift. Something inside him screamed, "Leave now." He threw the car in reverse, and suddenly both boys' voices twisted into something shrill, desperate, and unnatural. "We cannot come in unless you tell us we can come in. Let us in." Heart pounding, the man sped backwards out of the parking lot, tires screeching against the pavement. He was out of breath as he glanced in his mirror, but the boys were gone. The sidewalk outside the theater was completely empty, as if they had never been there at all.
This is part 2 of the disturbing case of Courtney Lynn Townsend. According to the Utah State Medical Examiner, Courtney's cause of death couldn't be determined because of how little remains were found, and they can't tell when she died either. But what's odd is that even though there is so little evidence left behind, authorities don't suspect foul play, and the Kane County Sheriff's Office isn't even investigating her death anymore. They said that one theory is that she was driving down the road that day, became high-centered on some rocks, which started a fire, and her death, however she may have died, was accidental. According to the police officer who found Courtney's car, it had snowed overnight, and when he located the car, it was cold to the touch, and there were no footprints in the snow, which means that it was burned some time before the snow fell. What needs to be investigated further is the fact that Courtney got married a month before she went missing, and according to her family and friends, the man was really abusive towards her. From an outsider's perspective, and after talking with Courtney's sister, it really seems like the police dropped the ball on this investigation, and this situation in specific. A friend of the family has gone on to hire a professional dog handler in hopes of locating more of Courtney's remains. But it wasn't what they found that was shocking, it was what they didn't. The friend didn't tell the professional they hired where the remains were found, and they did this so that they could hopefully get a fresh scent and pick up on more remains. But the dogs ended up searching the exact area where Courtney's remains were found, yet they didn't pick up on a single hit. No trace or scent of Courtney was found, which led this professional to believe that Courtney died elsewhere and the bones that were found were brought to that location by either an animal or person after the fact. Adding to this mystery is the fact that in February of this year, a backpack was found on a city truck in St. George that contained items that belonged to Courtney. She was a loving mom, and it included her kids' birth certificates as well as other personal items. At this point, it's believed that Courtney had already been dead on Cedar Mountain for some time. So how did her belongings get on this city truck so far away, and who put them there? That has never been answered, and it's one of the main reasons that Courtney's family can't get any closure. All evidence points to there being foul play, yet police aren't even investigating her death anymore, even though so many questions remain. There's a Facebook page called Justice for Courtney, which is run by her sister, and some pictures have been posted of the site where Courtney's remains were found. And it's just really creepy what has been left behind, like this plate that has sledgehammer written on it. Someone in the group also looked up the exact coordinates of where Courtney's remains were found, and what's odd is that they found Google Earth images taken the day after her car was towed. You can see the burn marks in the ground, but what others are pointing out is that it looks like a woman is standing there. But who that person is, no one knows. It looks like she has brown hair and is wearing a black hoodie and blue jeans. This could be nothing, but it just doesn't seem like a coincidence that this was taken a day after her burned car was found. I just have so many questions in this case, like who those IDs belong to that were found near the burned car, and also what was inside the envelope that Courtney tried giving to the police officer, and more importantly, where's the rest of Courtney's body? Her family has created a GoFundMe to help finance and continue this independent investigation, so I'll leave that here. It's now been 4 months since she was found, but the circumstances surrounding her death remain a mystery.
We're going to talk about our experience with Joe Gatto.
Impractical Joker star Joe Gatto has been accused of doing inappropriate things with women again. This time the accusations come from these two girls who were teenagers at the time that this happened. So according to them, last year in December of 2024, they purchased tickets to see Joe Gatto and the meet and greet pass. Here's a photo from that meet and greet. One of the girls put it on her story and she started DMing with Joe. Afterwards, Joe allegedly sent the girls $35 for gas and Chipotle on Venmo. Afterwards, the girls attended another show and another meet and greet, and this time they took one of their dads to meet Joe. This time he allegedly invited them backstage, where they allegedly hung out in a small room with him and it got a little uncomfortable. Afterwards, they said that he began texting and messaging them constantly. And then he gave them free tickets and backstage passes to a third show. Here's a photo of them there, and they went backstage with him again. Except this time the girls said that he asked them to kiss multiple times. They claimed that he fed one of them mango with his fingers, and he asked them to pull up their shirts so that he could look at their stomachs, and afterwards he allegedly rubbed their stomachs up and down, making them incredibly uncomfortable. After this experience, he gave them $100. Oh yeah, and I forgot to add, he requested that they wear leggings. Afterwards, he bought them a hotel room close to his, and according to the girls, he began begging them for nudes, allegedly asked them to send him videos of them kissing, and tried as hard as he could to get them to come over. They said that they were creeped out by this behavior, and that they felt violated by someone they looked up to. So as you can see, some of these alleged screenshots are pretty creepy. And it should be noted that Joe was using, once again, vanish mode according to these girls, which is what his other accuser claimed he was using when he was DMing her. There definitely seems to be a pattern here. And if these screenshots are real, Joe definitely knew what he was doing. Also, here's a picture from one of the shows that one of the girls took, showing that this was December of 2024. Keep in mind, this was after Joe publicly claimed that he had reconciled with his wife and kids and gotten back together with them and was trying to rebuild his family. So if this is all true, I definitely think it's very, very creepy and inappropriate. You can have your own opinions about the whole thing, but you can't deny the fact that at the time he was trying to get back with his wife and be a better husband, while at the same time allegedly DMing these girls, asking them for nudes, asking them to come over and kiss him, and only God knows what would have happened if they would have gone over to that hotel room. According to the girls, also allegedly, I forgot to add this in, at one point Joe was allegedly trying to get the girls to come over to his hotel room late at night, and he claimed that his phone charger was across the room, and if they wanted to keep talking, they needed to come over to his hotel room to bring his charger over to him. According to the girls, he also allegedly said that he could sneak them into the hotel around the security and the, crew from his show. Keep in mind, these girls were teenagers at the time. I mean, they most likely still are teenagers since this video was posted recently and this happened just a few months ago. But if all this is true, things aren't exactly looking great for Joe Gatto. And it pains me to say that because I am a huge Impractical Jokers fan.
How do you go from being a Playboy bunny, dating celebrities and partying with Elton John, to being found dead in a bush by a pharmacy? Ellen Price was born in March 1956 in the small town of Little Rock, Arkansas. But this small town girl would turn into a stunning and world-famous Playboy model. She went by the stage name Star Stowe and had always kind of just dreamed of making it big and just making a name for herself. She moved to Vegas and was captured by the bright lights and big city. She wanted to get noticed and also obviously needed to make some money in order to kind of support herself and live. So she started dancing at an adult nightclub. It was during these nights in Vegas that she ended up meeting lead singer of the band Kiss, Gene Simmons. And this meeting would set in motion a series of events that would change her life forever. Gene was really captivated by her and the pair began dating. He really believed in her and obviously could see just how stunning she was and how much potential she had to become a model. He was like, let's get you noticed, so he sent her photos to Playboy. And sure enough, it worked. She ended up being the 1977 centerfold. For this small town girl, it felt like all of her dreams were coming true. She was hanging out with people like Elton John and rubbing shoulders with people she'd previously only seen in magazines. However, being in the limelight, especially at such a young age, she was only 20, was dangerous. She was around a lot of substances and alcohol constantly, and she struggled with her mental health. She turned to these substances to try and cope with the fame and the chaotic lifestyle. Star and Gene ended up splitting after a few years, and she kind of went off the rails. Amidst the chaos, she met a man called Peter Malago, and the pair got pregnant. Star gave birth to their son Michael, but despite marrying Peter and feeling like this was gonna be it for her, the pair sadly got a divorce. Star would end up moving to Florida in 1986 and again went sort of back to working in this adult industry at nightclubs as a dancer. After initially living quite a luxurious celebrity lifestyle, she'd almost like come crashing back to earth. And struggling to make enough money to support her and her son, she had to send her son back to live with his nan. She then just spiraled further into addiction. She was doing S-work to make ends meet, and she would always kind of go through these periods of addiction, and then she would manage to claw her way back out, but then would get sucked back in again. It really was this cycle that I feel a lot of people with addiction really will relate to. In 1991, for example, she got clean and met a guy who she lived with for a while, and things were going great. But unfortunately, after they split, she again went down that slippery slope. Just prior to her 41st birthday in 1997, Star was spotted by members of the public between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. in the local neighborhood. She would never be seen alive again. Tragically, her body was found strangled and partially clothed that day, dumped in a bush behind a pharmacy in Coral Springs. Chillingly, this wasn't the only murder in the area. An S-worker named Sandra Walters had also been murdered on the 25th of February that year, so just a couple of weeks prior. And the cause of death was exactly the same. It was strangulation. Then again, another woman, Tammy Strunk, was murdered in the November. Police strongly believed that these killings were linked. Like I said, the MO was identical. They felt chillingly there was a serial killer in the area. Horrifically, though, there was a real lack of evidence and any suspects, and Star's case remains unsolved.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is what would happen if you ate dry ice, and it wouldn't be good at all. Okay, so you very well could have eaten dry ice before, in a cocktail or ice cream, but that's in extremely small doses. The real thing is negative 109 degrees Fahrenheit, which means as soon as you eat it, you will feel a cooling sensation all around your mouth. Your tongue and mouth will be frozen in a matter of seconds, which wouldn't be fun. And your teeth will feel extremely awful. Just imagine biting into the coldest ice cream bar imaginable. And if you kept it in there longer, you will eventually get frostbite. But if you swallow the dry ice, that's where the real problems begin. It will then land in your stomach, and if you eat enough of it, you will have a very, very sharp pain. And the craziest thing is, you will actually get frostbite on your stomach lining. And the more and more you eat, it will start to turn into gas, which would result in you burping up freezing gas. And eventually, after some time, your stomach will explode. So whatever you do, never eat dry ice unless you want your mouth looking like this and your stomach exploding.
So this week it came out that Kristen Chenoweth was almost a victim of the Girl Scout murders. This is going to be part of a new series called Close Encounters about people who narrowly escaped a horrible fate, so follow along for more. Some quick backstory is in 1977, 3 girls were found murdered on their first night at Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma. They were all staying in a tent together, and their bodies were found on the trail leading to the camp showers. Now, in 1977, there was no way to test for DNA evidence, but a local man, Gene Leroy Hart, had actually escaped prison and was on the run. He was arrested for the murders, but was acquitted by a jury. There was actually a note found on the campgrounds 2 months earlier that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1, but that note was discarded by the camp director, thinking it was a prank. Now, Broadway actress Kristen Chenoweth was actually supposed to be on that trip. She fell ill that weekend and was unable to go, but she says that it's haunted her entire life. So it wasn't until this year, 45 years after the murders took place, that we might finally have enough DNA evidence to convict Gene Leroy Hart. He passed away in 1979, but this might at least give some closure to the families. Hulu just released a documentary called Keeper of the Ashes about this entire event. Let me know if you're going to watch this weekend.
Conducted inhumane medical experiments without limits in the concentration camps of Auschwitz. I am Josef Mengele, a German doctor and SS officer in 1943. I was supposed to be responsible for selecting detainees upon their arrival. I was so cruel that no selection took place. I sent them all to the gas chamber. During this time, I carried out increasingly bizarre experiments, particularly on twins due to my obsession with human genetics. I subjected prisoners to organ extractions, injections of toxic substances, unnecessary surgeries, and other medical tortures, all without anesthesia, only for my personal medical experimentation. I even attempted to alter the genetics of patients to fit the criteria of my SS officer ideologies. I also performed numerous involuntary sterilizations using methods that caused suffering to prisoners due to the infections they provoked. The human experiments I conducted at Auschwitz represent one of the darkest chapters in the history of medicine. Despite this, I was never convicted for these acts because I fled to South America for many years. I died of a heart attack in 1979 in Brazil, never having been judged for my crimes.
This is what would happen if you were the only person on Earth. Up first, if you're the only person on Earth, you can do and go anywhere you virtually want. Which would be awesome, but you should be way more concerned about your survival. You have to be extremely careful where you want to seek shelter, because cities would be extremely dangerous. And without proper maintenance, they will start to fall apart pretty quickly, and you can even run into dangerous insects and animals. Next, if you wanted to go to the country, even that isn't safe. 400 nuclear power plants will begin to fail and explode, causing hundreds of nuclear explosions, which wouldn't be good at all. Now, when it comes to food, supermarkets are the place to go. They have enough canned foods there to last you decades. But if eating natural is more your style, you might have to hunt like they did back in the old days. Finally, for water, you will have thousands of liters to go through. This is from all the bottles of water at different stores and places. But eventually, you will have to learn how to purify your own water, which really isn't hard at all. So all in all, if you play your cards right, you can easily survive being the only person on Earth.
TikToker faked having cancer in order to trick people out of money via a fundraising page. A TikToker from Iowa called Madison Russo was arrested in January this year after faking having pancreatic cancer. She did this in October 2022 when she was a university student. She claimed on social media that she had been diagnosed with the life-threatening condition. Initially, people believed her, but then medical professionals came forward to cast doubt over her claims. They stated that there were medical discrepancies in her story. Police then actually got involved and looked at her medical records, which confirmed that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. She was charged with theft by means of deception for using the fake illness to raise nearly $38,000 from kind donors online. She had set up a GoFundMe in order to obtain money and has now been ordered to pay restitution. She was recently given a 10-year suspended sentence, and the judge ordered her to pay the restitution and over $1,000 fine. She will also have to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge stated that she had taken part in a criminal scheme and that serious crimes must have serious consequences. The judge stated that she had deceived friends, family, her community, other cancer victims, charities, and strangers.
These are scary videos you should never watch at night. Okay, so the video I'm about to show you shows a kid who was home alone one night when something or somebody started knocking on his door saying it was his mother. But the thing is, his mom wasn't even home because she was working the night shift. And the way it's knocking and sounding make it sound so demonic. Let me know what you think this is because it's absolutely disturbing.
Gabe? Gabe? reported my own abduction to obtain $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund. My name is Sherry Papini. I am a mother of 2 children, and on November 2nd, 2016, I was reported missing by my husband, Keith Papini. I had gone for a morning jog and did not return. Authorities quickly initiated a search to find me. About 3 weeks later, on November 24th, 2016, I was found near a highway in Woodland, California, approximately 240 kilometers from where I had disappeared. I was injured and bound with chains. The precise details of what happened during my disappearance remained unclear and gave rise to much speculation. I told investigators that I had been abducted by 2 masked Hispanic women who allegedly beat and mistreated me during my captivity. I claimed to have been released by my captors and left on the side of the road. Authorities conducted a thorough investigation into the case, but obviously found nothing. I received over $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund and, according to some sources, possibly an additional $127,567 from Social Security. Subsequently, authorities uncovered the deception, leading to my conviction and imprisonment in a federal institution in 2022.
Have you heard of the singer who narrowly escaped Ted Bundy? This is part of a series called Close Encounters, people who just barely escaped a terrible fate, so follow along for more. So Debbie Harry is the iconic singer from the band Blondie, and one night in 1970, before she was even famous, she was out late at night walking by herself in Manhattan. And that's when she was approached by an attractive man in a white Volkswagen Beetle. Sound familiar? She said she got a bad feeling from the man and said no, but he was pretty persistent. And she had been walking a while and her feet were hurting and she was tired, so eventually she kind of just gave in and got in the car. She quickly realized that something was not right with this car. The backseat had no window cranks and no handles, like there was no way for her to get out of the car. She starts panicking, but she has the wherewithal to reach her arm out of the open window and open the car door from the outside. But the man driving sees her do this, so he speeds up and takes a really sharp corner, throwing her out of the car onto the street. Years later, during the Ted Bundy trial, Debbie Harry was watching TV and immediately recognized him. Some people are skeptical and say that Ted Bundy might have been in Florida when Debbie reported seeing him, but all of these years, Debbie has remained steadfast in the fact that it was definitely him that picked her up, and all of the details she has noted about the car have been spot on. Bundy went on to confess to the murder of 30 women, but a lot of people think that number is a lot higher. So thank God she got out of that car.
This is the unsolved murder of Anton Jermaine Hyman. Anton was described by his mother Vanessa as a happy boy, well liked by the girls and a proper Jack the Lad. He liked basketball, music, his moped, and was also into plaiting and cutting hair. He was also a doting big brother to his little sister. On March 20th, 2004, Anton said bye to his mum and left the house. He was seen by witnesses buying a Mother's Day card and then getting into a taxi outside KFC by himself. Anton's body was discovered by a passerby around 11 a.m. on March 21st, 2004. He was lying face down in the River Brent. He'd been stabbed, shot and beaten. Forensic examinations showed that he'd been shot with a homemade .22 caliber bullet and stabbed with a 4.5-inch knife. A call to Anton's phone had also been answered after the time that police believe he died, but they've been unable to trace whoever answered that call. Anton's family over the years have put out multiple appeals for information and even offered £20,000 as a reward for any information that leads to the killer being found. Anton's mother believes there's a fear factor around his death and anyone coming forward. She said that his death was brutal and nobody would want to hold their hands up to doing that or to even knowing about it. Police believe he was killed the evening of the 20th of March 2004. He was captured on CCTV around 8 p.m. between Greenford Avenue and Brent Valley Park in Hanwell. It's now 9 years on from this murder and somebody out there must know something. There's been multiple arrests since Anton's death, but everyone's been released without charge, and the police are no closer to finding out what happened to Anton.
These are scary games to play in real life, part 2. This game is called Concentrate, and it's an extremely disturbing game that tells the players how they're going to die. To start the game, the person playing sits down on the ground with their eyes closed, and someone then sits behind them. Then the person behind will start lightly tapping on the player's back, while saying, "Concentrate, concentrate, people are dying, children are crying, concentrate, concentrate." Now tap on their head and say you just got hit with a hammer. Then poke both sides of their body and say you just got stabbed. Now grab their neck and swing them back and forth and say you just got hung. Finally, whisper in their ear saying you're standing on the edge of a building. You're feeling dizzy and suddenly somebody pushes you. Now tell the person to open their eyes and ask them what color did they see when their eyes were closed. And whatever color they saw will reveal how they will die. Red means you're going to get stabbed, blue means you are going to drown, yellow means you would die by poison, orange means you would die by fire, green means you would die from a great height, purple is suffocation, brown is buried alive, gray is dying from a disease in the hospital, white means you would die from old age and go to heaven, and black means you would die of old age and go to hell.
One of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire's first agents was a pedophile. This is an extremely disturbing story. So I can't find any real photos online of this guy. I don't know if he's wiped it off the face of the internet, but his name was Robert David Villard, or Bob Villard. He was an acting coach for young and aspiring actors, and he represented a number of the clients that he coached as well. So in 2004, a 17-year-old boy reported to the police that Bob had molested him when he was only 13. Bob pled no contest to the charges, validated the kid's story, and basically tried to put the whole thing behind him, but the internet would never let this story die. That is because he was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's first talent agents, and he took a number of pictures of him, including this picture right here, and even this picture. Now apparently he represented him for a good while because these are all photos that Bob took of Leo DiCaprio. And since Bob was an agent that represented a bunch of different children, only God knows how many kids he managed to victimize, or how many kids he victimized that stayed silent. So I'm looking at newspapers.com right now. Now this is interesting. This is something that I never found. I should say this is something that I never found talked about in any of these articles, but I think this is the same guy, Robert David Villard. He's right here in a newspaper in 1987. So this was over 15 years before he was charged with actually touching a child. He was caught in a CP sting. I'm finding this out right now for the first time on newspapers.com. Check this out. This is an actual old article. So this is a whole old article from 1987. Look who else is here. Robert David Villard, 40, an agent for child actors. That has to be the same guy. So he was charged with receiving or interstate transportation of CP. That is crazy. So yeah, I guess that just proves once a pedophile, always a pedophile.
This man very nearly got away with murder until he decided to strike again. It was the 15th of July 2010 and Norma Lopez was just a normal 17-year-old girl. She was a hard-working girl who loved dancing and fashion. She was attending summer school at Valley View High in California. On the day in question, she left her final class of the day and went to meet friends. She usually walked from school with her boyfriend, but on this occasion she was alone. She was on her way to her friend's house near the school. When she never turned up though, her friends were concerned. They decided to see if they could meet her on the way and they walked her route across a field towards the school. It was there that they made a worrying discovery. Norma's bag, a school binder and a broken earring were lying on the floor. Norma though was nowhere to be seen. They called police and a search began, but no luck. 5 days later, it was announced that there was a $35,000 reward for information leading to Norma's return. Tragically, this didn't help and just a few hours later Norma's body was discovered. She was found deceased just over 2 miles away from where she had vanished. She was found with no clothes on from the waist up and her death was determined a homicide, but her cause of death was not determined. The hunt was on to find her killer, but it would actually take a year before a breakthrough. In the meantime, police tested DNA that they found on Norma's earring and it had no matches. That was until September 2011 when a match came through following a man being arrested on an unrelated charge. This was 42-year-old Jesse Perez Torres. They also found that his DNA was all over Norma's clothes too. He was arrested for the kidnap and murder of Norma. At his trial, it was revealed that he had randomly encountered the girl on her solo walk. He had been reportedly angry about his wife leaving him during that time. An anonymous woman also testified that he had attacked her too, dragging her into his car at knife point and R-ing her. He was found guilty and was given the death penalty.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. At least that's what a lot of people think. Today we're going to take a look at some of the evidence that may refute the official story. And you can decide for yourself what you think about this whole thing, but let me tell you, some of this stuff is pretty crazy. If you want me to do a whole series about Jeffrey Epstein, his life and his crimes, let me know in the comments section below, but today we're talking about his death. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested when he was leaving his private jet. And a little bit over a month later, he was found dead in his jail cell. When Epstein was arrested, this was absolutely national news. Everybody was talking about it. It was such a crazy story because he had so many powerful connections. He had been really good friends with the President of the United States at the time, tech moguls, and loads of other celebrities and politicians from across the planet. So everybody in prison knew that this guy needed to be guarded, right? I mean, he was literally the most high-profile prisoner in America. So this is where the story starts to get a little strange. So according to various prison psychologists that had talked to Jeffrey Epstein while he was in prison, he said that he didn't want to take his own life. Many times he expressed to these people that he didn't like pain, he was a coward, it was against his religion, and that he would literally never do that to himself. And I know that it is possible that he was manipulating people into thinking that he wouldn't do it just so that he could do it, but it is interesting that he was talking about this all the time. So the mistakes surrounding Epstein's arrest and eventual death started right away. On a prison intake form, he was listed as a black inmate, obviously he was white, and it also stated that he had no prior sex offense convictions, even though he was a registered sex offender. Like I said, this is the most high-profile inmate in America, so why would they make these mistakes? There were also multiple phone calls placed by Jeffrey Epstein that were not logged and not recorded by the prison system. They have no real record of who he called or who he talked to, and that is obviously a blatant violation of any prison's policy. For the entire month that he was held in prison, all the psychologists agreed that he may have seemed a little down, but he didn't seem like he was about to take his own life. On the night that Epstein took his own life, he made a social phone call. This phone call was not recorded, it was not logged, like I said, as prison policy states that it should be. And later on, the unit manager asked who Epstein had called, and he said his own mother, which didn't make sense because Epstein's mom died in 2004. In reality, that phone call was placed to his girlfriend at the time, Karina, who was a dentist from New York. There are 3 people that have knowledge of this phone call. None of them have stated that Epstein gave any indication that he was about to take his life. And it's interesting because the New York Times asked the Bureau of Prisons for Epstein's phone logs from prison, and they released them, but that phone call was not on the logs. After this, Epstein was escorted back into his cell at 7:49 p.m. by a guard named Tova Noel. And it was at this point in the night when the story takes a turn, and all of the controversy really begins. I'm going to cover all the stuff that surrounds his actual death in the next part of this TikTok series, so follow me if you want to hear the stuff from his jail cell that's inconsistent with the official story.
This is the story of Stephanie Hamill. Stephanie, a 20-year-old travel agent from Wakefield, West Yorkshire, had her whole life ahead of her. She was engaged to the love of her life, James Garland, and was looking forward to a really bright future. Steph and James had met at school when they were just 13 and 15, proper childhood sweethearts. By the ages of 18 and 20, they'd moved into their first place together in Wakefield, and 6 months later, James asked Steph to marry him. By summer 2003, Steph had started shopping for a wedding dress with her mum Jane. The big white wedding was all she could talk about. She was so excited to marry the love of her life. Unfortunately, the couple never got to set a date for their wedding. On November 29, 2003, the couple had enjoyed a night out together in Wakefield city centre. As the pubs and bars of Westgate were closing, and after grabbing a takeaway, the couple were going to walk home, but instead decided to try and flag down a taxi. Stephanie had been walking slightly ahead of James as the pavement was narrow, and they soon saw headlights coming towards them. Stephanie stuck out her arm, and a black Mercedes pulled up just ahead of her. As it had stopped, Stephanie assumed the car was a taxi and started to climb into the back seat. Just as James was approaching the car, the driver put his foot on the accelerator and sped right past James. Stephanie's leg was still hanging out of the back door, and James could hear her desperately screaming his name. The driver of the car was 29-year-old Ioannis Revenikiotis. He'd previously sexually assaulted a pregnant woman, and just an hour before picking up Stephanie, he'd also tried to lure 2 other girls into his taxi. When they told him to get lost, he'd carried on driving, looking for his next victim. James managed to flag down a police van, and between his distraught sobs, he managed to tell them that Steph had been taken. They drove James home to see if Steph had turned up there, but as they pulled up to the house and saw it was still in darkness, a voice came over the radio and told them that someone had been found in the road just 2 miles away. Stephanie had been found on the outskirts of Wakefield, lying in the middle of the road. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Stephanie had feared for her life as Reverend Otis drove her towards the countryside. She'd managed to get the door open, falling from the car, and being hit by an oncoming vehicle. That vehicle didn't stop and dragged Stephanie down the road before fleeing the scene. It was 2 years of living in absolute limbo for Stephanie's family before Reverend Otis was tracked down. His car was found in a scrapyard in Greece and he was arrested. It was another 2 years before he was charged, but in 2007 the jury found him guilty of Stephanie's kidnap and manslaughter and he was sentenced to 11 years. The driver of the car that hit Stephanie and failed to stop was Mohammed Ashik. He was given a 200-hour community punishment order and banned from driving for 18 months. At the trial of Reverend Otis and as the verdict was read, Stephanie's family could be seen punching the air in the gallery. They said nothing could bring Stephanie back, but they took some small comfort in knowing he'd been jailed.
Did this mum save her children from a horrific attack, or was she a cold-blooded killer? It was the evening of the 13th of December 2001. Tracy Roberts was at home with her 3 children in Iowa. She would later tell police of the horrors of that evening. She said 2 men broke into her house while she was bathing her 1-year-old daughter. At this point, her husband was apparently out of town. She told police that she ran to her son Bert's room and gave him the baby before being pulled back. She said one of the intruders choked her until she became unconscious. Now, Bert apparently stayed in the bedroom guarding his 2 younger siblings and arming himself with a baseball bat. A short time later, when Tracy realised she had regained consciousness, she ran to her bedroom and apparently grabbed a weapon from a safe. She then fired her weapon at one of the men, causing him to collapse onto the bathroom floor. The other intruder apparently escaped. Now, Tracy's 11-year-old son, Bert Pittman, backed up his mum's story, but there were doubts. Investigators found Tracy's neighbour, 20-year-old Dustin Wade, dead in the home and began to analyse the scene. Interestingly, he'd been shot 9 times with 2 different guns. Tracy explained this by stating that her and her children were trying to get out of the house after she had shot the man, and they saw the person on the floor move, so she shot him again. She said in the frenzy and the panic, she'd grabbed a different weapon to do so. She then said when she found out the intruder was Dustin, she was devastated. She knew Dustin's family, and her husband Michael actually had apparently grown quite close with him. Police started looking into finding intruder number 2, who had seemingly got away, but with no luck. They then started to wonder if he even existed. Interestingly, nothing of value had been stolen from the house. The only thing that was found was an old computer, which had carefully been placed into Dustin's car, which was on the drive. A paramedic also stated that the marks found on Tracy's neck did not match with strangulation and seemed to be self-inflicted. Tracy's ex-husband John was looked into as the pair were in the middle of a custody battle. To police, she painted a picture of an abusive ex who she alleged SA'd her son Bert. He denied this and claimed that Tracy was the one who was abusive to him and that she'd even threatened him once with a gun. Then investigators turned their attention to Tracy's husband Michael. As I said, he'd had a close relationship with Dustin, but apparently had been physically abusive to Bert. He allegedly even broke his nose once during an argument. Michael denied this, but he did have a history of violence. He was arrested in December 2000 after an argument with Tracy. Tracy accused him of pushing her to the floor and making her hit her head. Michael claimed that Tracy once got him drunk and tried to suffocate him with a bag. Following all the accusations and counter-accusations, the pair divorced. The case went cold and Tracy moved to Nebraska with her children. Now, Dustin's mum remained incredibly frustrated about her son's death. To her, it didn't make any sense. Dustin considered Tracy a friend, and he also hadn't armed himself with any type of weapon going into the house. He'd also just kind of casually parked his car on the front drive. His mum's concern grew when she found out that he actually had been shot into the back of the head 4 times. This indicated that the shooting was not self-defense. The case was reopened in 2008 and there were more troubling revelations. The house hadn't been particularly dishevelled and there were inconsistencies in Tracy's story. Many who knew her described her as manipulative and aggressive. Then there was the discovery of a notebook in Dustin's car. Dustin had seemingly written a strange tale about being contacted by John, who was Tracy's ex-husband. In the notebook it said that John wanted Dustin to kill Tracy. However, there was something strange about this tale in the notebook. It gave very specific details about John that Dustin would never have known on his own. Investigators started to wonder whether Tracy had fed Dustin this information to write in the notebook on the night he was killed. They noticed that the language that was used in the notebook was almost identical to the language Tracy used to describe John. She was arrested and charged with Dustin's murder. It later came out that Tracy had asked Dustin to come to the house on his own sometimes to do paperwork for her. Police believed that maybe Tracy was just trying to use Dustin in order to frame her ex-husband and therefore win the custody battle. Tracy was eventually sentenced to life in prison. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.